So this is the 1st of July and we're continuing with chapter 15, a few paragraphs in. The punch threw me in a strong sweat and a deep slumber. The good people let me lie, and it was near noon of the next day before I took the road, my throat already easier and my spirits quite restored by good fare and good news. The old gentleman, although I pressed him hard, would take no money, and gave me an old bonnet for my head. Though I am free to own, I was no sooner out of the view of his house than I very jealously washed this gift of his in a wayside fountain. Thought I to myself, if these are the wild Highlanders, I would wish my own folk wilder. I not only started late, but I must have wandered nearly half the time. True, I met plenty of people grubbing in little miserable fields that would not keep a cat, or herding little kine about the bigness of asses. I don't know what kine are, I'd have looked that up. And as you can see, there aren't too many people working in this field. Not the weather for it. Although I don't think anybody works in this field anyway. The Highland dress being forbidden by law since rebellion, and the people condemned to the lowland habit, which they much disliked, it was strange to see the variety of their array. Some went bare, only for a hanging cloak or great coat, and carried their trousers on their backs like a useless burden. Some had made an imitation of the tartan, with little party-coloured stripes patched together like an old wife's quilt. Others again still wore the Highland philibeg, but by putting a few stitches between the legs transformed it into a pair of trousers like a Dutchman's. All those makeshifts were condemned and punished, for the law was harshly applied in hopes to break up the clan spirit. But in that out-of-the-way sea-bound isle there were few to make remarks and fewer to tell tales. So basically they used to have fashion police here, many hundreds of years ago. Extraordinary. They all seemed in great poverty, and the roads, even such a wandering country by-track as the one I followed, were infested with beggars. Well, I haven't met one of those yet. And here again I marked a difference from my own part of the country, for our lowland beggars had a louting, flattering way with them, and if you gave them a plaque and asked change, would very civilly return you a bottle. I don't know what any of these words mean. But these Highland beggars stood in their dignity, asked alms only to buy snuff, and would give no change. To be sure, there was no concern of mine, except in so far as it entertained me by the way. What was much more to the purpose, few had any English, and these few not very anxious to place it at my service. I knew Torosay to be my destination, which is, I've got to keep going that way, and repeated the name to them and pointed, but instead of simply pointing in reply, they would give me a screed of the Gaelic that set me foolish. So it was small a wonder if I went out of my road as often as I stayed in it. I think I'm a little bit out of the road here. At last, about 8 at night, and already very weary, I came to a lone house, which I think I can show you, where I asked admittance and was refused until I bethought me of the power of money in so poor a country. I held up one of my guineas in my finger and thumb, and thereupon the man of the house, who had hitherto pretended to have no English and driven me from his door by signals, suddenly began to speak as clearly as was needful, and agreed for 5 shillings to give me a night's lodging and guide me the next day to Torosay. Okay, well, let's just zoom in on him. I've got to get to the lone house. So you can see it started raining, so it's a bit more miserable. It's dried off a moment, and it's very boggy underfoot and quite hard. So I'm doing more walking and less communicating today. So if you've been trying to look out for me, I'm sorry if you haven't found me on the map. But I'll try and do better tomorrow. Okay, see you then. Oh, tomorrow, very interesting. Very short passage, but we'll probably go down to the loch. And we're going to meet, we're trying to go to the rich man's house. I think there is quite a smart house over behind the woods here. Okay, now